What the fuck is going on? Here we go.
And like all of them being at a party in really West, I'm strapped.
Is when they dropped the accusation against Robert Forrest.
Robert. Wait, Jason's dad.
Yep, Jason's own.
This one. Where the fuck is it? Not that one. They totally changed that.
Buckle up, listen. Father.
Yeah.
The source paints.
They totally changed that.
Because today we are diving headfirst into a story that could practically be ripped from the headlines. What you think, right? Where do you even begin to weigh a way to potentially contact those long gone
and then has the both at the time. And which one is one where I put in? But see, like that is rating. I'm going to use, but this is the.
Buckle up, listeners, because today we are diving headfirst into a story that could practically be ripped from the headlines.
But the neurofibromatosis type.
Terrible. It keeps you guessing what'll happen next. It's like opening a comic book for the first time.
These glimpses. Remember how Nick, he compares it to being a kid? Staying up past bedtime when everything's...
But even super...
And that...
I do not... This is... Or how fictional me describes his first chapter. Does it say that? Right hold over that... The chapter that I went through and allowed people to pause and read. I might reuse it. It's a whole... Oh my god, it... My... Fuck! It's a whole... like definitely the car ride, but
Nick describes his powers first appearing.
How could I forget? It was such a
Sense of wonder
Didn't
to some,
happen.
right? We know some of these heroes, it's in their blood. Generations of
it's a whole. Oh my god! My fuck. The pause and read. The chapter that I like went through. It's nowhere in. I do not. Hallucination. The complete hallucination.
Exactly. And that could be, well, pretty intense.
I'm gonna feel that.
humanized.
No.
I never described that in the story. Not once.
Heroes, they start somewhere. They have those childhood moments that shape them.
Exactly. And that ties back into what we were saying about family legacy, right? We know some of these heroes, it's in their blood.
Childhood moments that shape them.
Exactly intense.
It humanizes it. And
He compares it to being a kid, staying up past bedtime when everything's quiet and feels kind of magical.
it's nostalgic, right?
Totally. And it brings this sense of wonder to something that could be, well, pretty intense.
It humanizes it. Reminds us that even superheroes, they start somewhere. They have those childhood moments that shape them.
Exactly.
Fucking describe
And that ties back into what we were saying about family legacy, right? We know some of these heroes, it's in their blood.
Pick up
Generations of
what is
superpowers.
But what happens
also
when that
play.
legacy starts to feel like a burden? Like, how much pressure is on Nick, especially keeping this huge EE secret from his own family?
Right. He's living this double life, and you can feel the strain it's putting on him. You know, it makes me think about, well, everyone's got secrets, right? Big or small, it's that hidden part of ourselves.
Absolutely. And it's often when those secrets are closest to being exposed that our true selves come out, don't you think?
For sure. And speaking of exposure, those excerpts ended on
Big or small.
one heck of a cliffhanger.
Talk about a cliffhanger. We're left with so many questions.
Nothing beats
Right.
a cleaner
Something wicked this way comes, but what is it? What clues do we have?
Well, the author's being deliberately vague, but there are a few things that stand out. Like, Nick's anxiety is palpable.
Yeah, if he's worried and he's seen some things, right, that says something.
Exactly. And the text mentions a shadow falling over the city. Now, that could be literal
Or metaphorical.
Precisely. It's unsettling either way.
So we've got shadows, anxiety, unanswered questions. It's like the author cranked up the tension and hit pause.
And that's the mark of a good storyteller. Makes you desperate to know more.
Speaking of good storytelling, even with the looming threat, the excerpts make room for these smaller, character-driven moments. Like, I love the scene where Nick tries explaining his superhero life to his little sister.
Oh, that was sweet and funny.
Right. It's
What the fuck? One, I don't have a little sister. Two, I didn't give myself a little sister. And that never happened in the story. How much is it going to fucking hallucinate? This is correct. It's not just three powerful superheroes, but
like the author's using humor to give us a breather from the intensity. Plus, we've all been there, trying to explain something complex to someone who just doesn't get it.
It's relatable, and his sister isn't just there for comedic relief. Her innocent questions, they make Nick confront his own feelings about this double life.
It shows how much keeping secrets, even to protect the people we love, can weigh on us. And it's not just Nick, right? There are hints that other heroes are dealing with their own family drama. Like, one of the teenagers mentions feeling like they're a disappointment to their famous parent.
Heavy stuff, and that's what I find so compelling about this story. It embraces the messy reality of family, even in this heightened superhero world.
Like they say, with great power comes great responsibility and a whole lot of family therapy. But seriously, that depth, It's not always there in superhero stories.
Agreed. And setting it in Barrie, Ontario just emphasizes that. It says this could be anywhere. These anxieties, they're universal.
Totally. And speaking of things that pique our curiosity, we keep coming back to those awesome hero names. The Emerald Hood, the Ruby Knight. And we're getting these hints about their powers too, right?
Subtle hints, but definitely there. Like, we know the Emerald Hood can manipulate plants.
But it's not this big flashy reveal.
Yeah.
It's just part of who they are.
Exactly. Part of the world. Which makes the threat they're facing even more intriguing. I mean, if these heroes are so powerful.
What could possibly be strong enough to challenge them?
Right. What could scare them? That's the million-dollar question. And right now, the author's not giving us any easy answers.
Which honestly makes it even more compelling.
For sure. Our imaginations can run wild with the possibilities.
And that's the beauty of a good story, isn't it? It sparks our curiosity and leaves us wanting more. You know, it's funny. We've been talking about these excerpts, these characters, like they're real people.
I know, right? It's easy to get invested when the writing is this strong.
And one thing that struck me is how much is left unsaid. Like those gaps in the story, they actually make it more powerful.
Oh, absolutely. It's the mark of a good writer, knowing when to hold back, to let the reader fill in the blanks with their own imagination.
Exactly. Like, we talk about this looming threat, but we never actually find out what it is, do we?
We see its effects, though. The fear it causes, that sense of encroaching darkness. It's unsettling because it's undefined.
Right. It becomes this blank slate for our own anxieties, which is way scarier than any monster the author could have described.
Because then it's personal, that dread, that unknown. It's outwise. And that's a powerful tool for a writer to use.
Totally. It's like the author's saying, I'm giving you the pieces, but you put them together.
Yeah.
Makes you an active participant in the story.
And that's what we want as readers, right? To be engaged, to be challenged.
Exactly. And this author doesn't just leave us hanging with the big stuff. There are all these little seeds of doubt planted throughout these excerpts, too. Like, what if Nick's powers aren't enough? What if those family secrets he's guarding, what if they backfire?
That's the good stuff, those what-if moments that keep you up at night, even after you've finished reading.
For sure. It's not about getting easy answers. It's about sitting with the uncertainty, the what-ifs, and that stays with you.
Oh, absolutely. Like that final shot of a movie, long after the credits have rolled, it's that lingering feeling that sticks with you.
And that's what these excerpts have done, haven't they? Given us this taste of a world both familiar and strange, these characters dealing with extraordinary circumstances, but also these very human struggles. And we're left with questions, but I think that's a good thing. It means the story has resonated, made us curious to discover more.
Exactly. It sparked something in us. That's the magic of a good story, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, to our listener, we say, take those excerpts, dive into those source materials, and see what you uncover. What resonates with you? What theories do you have? Because the best deep dives, they're a two-way street. Thanks for joining us.
Oh boy.
Okay, so today we're going to be diving into Between the Worlds.
Okay.
And specifically, we're looking at excerpts from the Crimson Clock and the Emerald Hood chapters. And right off the bat, these stories take us to Barrie, Ontario. Which, you know, seems like a pretty ordinary place, right?
Right.
But, as we're going to see, things aren't always as they appear to be. So, what really struck you about the initial, like, tone of these chapters?
Yeah.
Because to me, I don't know about you, but I felt this, like, palpable tension right from the get-go.
Well, absolutely. I think you see that even in the way that, like, Nick's opening scene is set up, right? He's driving through Barrie,
Yeah.
and it's unusually quiet. And I think it's not even just the stillness. There's almost a sense of foreboding there. Like, he's bracing himself for something. So it's a really effective way, I think, to kind of hook the reader right from the beginning.
Yeah, totally, yeah. You're like, what is going on here? And then, boom, you've got this massive corruption scandal that hits. And it takes down, like, William Forrest, this prominent CEO. And his entire board.
Yeah, yeah.
Not exactly your everyday,
No, not
news story.
And I think it's interesting because, you know, you have the setup and it feels like it could be, you know, kind of a classic power struggle kind of narrative. But then
Okay.
there's this added layer to it where it gets really personal because it also involves William's son, Rock.
Nick Golden Boy,
Exactly.
Yeah.
The good son, right?
the philanthropist.
Always in the news, doing some charitable work.
Right, right.
It almost feels a little too perfect, you know? Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, I think, is, okay, so if Robert is so against his father's corrupt business practices, why is he still working for him? Is he a willing participant? Is he trapped? Or is there something else going on there? What are his motives?
Yeah, it really makes you question, like, his true intentions. Now, along with, this whole corporate drama that's unfolding, we're also introduced to Jason and Jimmy, who are twins, kind of on the cusp of adulthood.
Yeah.
And they seem, at least initially, pretty unaware of the storm that's brewing around their family. What do you make of their introduction, especially in light of everything else that we as the reader are privy to at this point?
It's a really effective use of dramatic irony, right? Because we, as the readers, we know about the scandal. We know about the secrets that are starting to unravel. But Jason and Jimmy are still in the dark, at least at this point. And so it kind of heightens the suspense because we're just waiting for that other shoe to drop. We know their world is about to be rocked.
Totally. It's like, when someone's about to walk into like a surprise party and you're just waiting for the door to open, and you're like, oh my God, they have no idea what's coming. It's kind of that feeling. And speaking of secrets, we can't forget about Nick, right? He seems like just another friend, part of the group. But as we find out, there's a lot more to him than meets the eye.
Yeah, absolutely. And his secret identity as the Crimson Clock adds this whole other dimension to the story. Like,
I'm Jacob Rupert.
Just imagine for a second, what if you found out that one of your friends was secretly a superhero? It just makes you wonder, right? Like, what else don't we know about the people we encounter every day?
Right. It's like that quiet kid in your class who turns out to be like a tech genius.
Yeah.
Or that shy neighbor who's actually a world-class chef. You just never know what lies beneath the surface.
But speaking of Nick and that kind of air of mystery surrounding him, let's go back to that sense of unease that he has at the beginning. Like, why is he so anxious about taking his friends out? It's just a night out, right? Or is it? I mean, it's got to be more than just like pre-party jitters, right?
I mean, we are talking about a world where superheroes are real. And Nick, as the Crimson Clock, he doesn't just like dress up for fun, He seems to have this sixth sense for trouble.
Yeah, definitely. And, that anxiety that he's exhibiting, I think, really points to a deeper connection to everything that's going on. Like, he can sense, even before the news breaks, the kind of storm that's on the horizon.
Oh, totally. It's like he could feel this seismic shift in their reality about to occur.
And speaking of seismic shifts, how about those superhero identity reveals?
Oh, yeah. Robert, the philanthropist, is the Emerald Hood. William, the corrupt CEO, is the Ruby Knight. It's almost Shakespearean.
It really
It's
is.
not. Thomas is the fucking Ruby Knight. God damn. The corrupt CEO is a back.
Yeah.
The way that the story connects each hero's identity to their role in the family business is fascinating. It's not just about, like, wealth and power, right? It's like there's this deeper legacy tied to these extraordinary abilities.
Totally. It makes you wonder, like, is it a birthright? Is it a burden? Or maybe a little bit of both. And what about the sister in all of this? She's described as being a skilled healer, but there's no mention of superpowers.
That's a really good point. I think her lack of powers is really intriguing. It sets her apart from the rest of her family. It makes you wonder, like, what is her role going to be in all of this?
Right.
Is she a pawn? Is she a wild card? Something else entirely.
It's like Chekhov's non-powered character. She's got to come into play at some point. But before we get too caught up in speculating about the sister, let's go back to that moment when the news of William's arrest actually breaks. Because Jason's reaction is, well, it's intense, to say the least.
It's devastating, right? I mean, his whole world just comes crashing down. Not only is his father implicated in this massive scandal, but his perception of Nick, who he doesn't yet know is the Crimson Clock, is also shattered. So it's like a betrayal on two fronts.
Totally. A double whammy. He's losing his father figure and his best friend all in one fell swoop. And the way the excerpt ends, with Jason running off into the night, classic cliffhanger.
Oh, absolutely. It leaves us wanting more. Like, what happens to Jason? Does he confront his father? Does he try to find Nick? Or does he just strike out on his own?
And I think these chapters do such a good job of, like, raising more questions than they answer. But it's that open-endedness that I think makes them so compelling.
Yeah.
It's like the story is inviting us to participate, to come up with our own interpretations.
So what did you think about that ending? Was it satisfying? Frustrating? A little bit of both. Oh, for sure, it's a cliffhanger, but it's the kind that, like, it doesn't leave you frustrated.
Right.
It makes you want to know more. It's more than just like the plot. It's
Yeah.
like you really feel for Jason.
Exactly.
And the emotional turmoil that he must be going through. It makes these characters feel so real. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that makes Between the Worlds so captivating. It's this really interesting blend of like a classic superhero narrative, but it's grounded in these very human experiences like betrayal, family secrets, the struggle to figure out who you are.
Right. And it doesn't hurt that it takes place in a real city.
Exactly.
With all these realistic details.
Right, like even just the mention of the drinking age being lowered back to 18 in Ontario.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, like, could this actually happen?
Right. Could this fictional world bleed into our own?
It's a question that kind of stays with you.
Totally.
Because it blends the familiar with the extraordinary so seamlessly that you almost start to question, like, what if there's more to our world than we realize?
What if we all have secret identities just waiting to be revealed? But on a more serious note, I found the chapter titles themselves, The Crimson Clock and The Emerald Hood. They're interesting, they sound like classic superhero monikers. But then you have the overarching title, Between the Worlds, which kind of hints at something more, don't you think?
Absolutely. It suggests that there are these blurred lines, not just between the ordinary and the extraordinary, but maybe even between like different dimensions, different realities. It's like the story is asking us to consider the possibility that there's something much larger at play here, something that we're only just starting to glimpse.
It's definitely food
And
for
I
thought.
can't
And
use
I think
Between
that's
the
what makes
Worlds
this
because
deep
it's
dive
already
so
a story.
fascinating. We've
Yeah.
unpacked the characters, we've explored the plot twists, but ultimately, Between the Worlds leaves us with more questions than answers. And that's okay, because it's a story that stays with you. It sparks your curiosity, and it invites you to imagine all the possibilities that might exist, just beyond the surface of our everyday lives. So until next time, keep exploring and keep asking those what-if questions.
I'm gonna skip this one for now. Into that one. This is this by itself. I think I've listened to this one.
All right, so today we're diving into a world of teenage, angst, family secrets, and superpowers.
Sounds intriguing.
You know those classic superhero origin stories? Secret identities?
Now I need to fucking look at the last thing again.
Legends and rumors. I can see how that would make for a good story.
Earth, or pack up and head back.
He's got that Zeus
Added the other after it already created this. Great. And not tell.
If that wasn't enough, even his...
even if it's not what he expects.
Because I have to stay on track with my pills and my all the painkillers that I'm on because of... You do the math here.
Identity, it's something we've all experienced.
Okay, listen to that one. Listen to that one. Stream on it.
Okay, so today we're going to be diving in
It almost feels a little too perfect, you know? Exactly. And that, like, just imagine for a second. What if you found out that one of your friends...
action is, well, it's intense, to say the least.
must have them all gone. I guess you can listen to this one. I've listened to it. But...
Ever get that feeling, like you've walked into a movie, but you've missed the first act?
Huh?
That's kind of how I felt diving into this story. We're dropped right into the action in 2015, Barrie, Ontario, and there's this young hero, calls himself, wait for it, the Crimson Clock.
Oh, I love it with stories just jump right in, no messing around.
Right, Crimson Clock. But let me back up a sec, set the scene. It's this 18-year-old, Nick, and he's up against this villain. And get this, the villain knows Nick's superhero name, his real name, even drops his birthday casually.
Ooh, that's creepy, like next level villain move right there.
Totally. Gives me chills just thinking about it. So we've got Nick, the Crimson Clock. He's got gadgets, this cool watch that can freeze time, but he's not exactly Superman. What'd you think about that? A hero without, inherent superpowers.
I think it makes him more interesting, don't you? Like, he has to rely on his wits, his strategy, makes him more relatable, too. Most of us aren't born with superpowers, right?
That's true. True. Though
Most of us
time
aren't born with
freezing would be pretty
superpowers.
handy some days.
Yeah.
All of
Anyway,
us aren't born
Crimson
with
Clock's not alone.
superpowers.
He's got a partner, the Emerald Hood. We're getting, classic Archer vibes, bit more experience.
Yeah.
But then the author throws in this line about a Mr. Mayor. What's that all about?
See, that's what grabbed me. It's like, boom, instant mystery. Is this Emerald Hood some respected figure by day, then vigilante by night? Love that layer of intrigue.
So much intrigue. And just when you think you're starting to get a handle on these heroes, bam, we meet the villain, Giovanni. What struck you about him?
He's the opposite of in-your-face villainy. This Giovanni, he's calm, in control, like he's always thinking 10 steps ahead. And the fact that he waits, observes. It's unnerving, right?
Totally. And you can't forget, he knows Nick's identity, birthday, all that. It's not just power, it's unsettling. What does it tell you about Giovanni that he has access to all that?
It tells me this guy is organized, connected. He's the kind of villain who does his homework. It's almost like his superpower is information, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. And speaking of information, the story takes place in Barrie, Ontario. Kind of an interesting choice, right? Not exactly Gotham City.
Right. It subverts expectations,
Yeah.
and by putting these characters in a more everyday setting, it makes the stakes feel more, real. Like, this could be happening anywhere, even in our own backyards almost.
And you know what really gets me? That this whole showdown happens in this seemingly ordinary warehouse. But it's not just any warehouse, is it? It's like Giovanni's secret lair, a full-on weapons factory.
Exactly. Remember, we were talking about how organized this guy is. This isn't some random hideout. It's a sign of his ambition. He's thinking big picture.
It's kind of terrifying when you think about it. Like, what exactly is he building in there? And who are these people working for him? It's not like he's hiring amateurs. Right?
No, these are skilled artisans, people who know their craft. It just shows how deep Giovanni's resources go and the contrast, right? Our heroes, they're trying to protect this world, and Giovanni, he's building weapons, amassing power.
And he's not afraid to use it, that's for sure. I mean,
Right.
the way he just casually outs the Emerald Hood right in the middle of this standoff, calling him Mr. Mayor, like, talk about ruthless.
It's a power move, no doubt. He wants to throw them off balance, undermine their authority. And think about it, the Emerald Hood, this experienced hero, he surrenders to protect the Crimson Clock and probably everyone else in that warehouse.
Which is such a classic hero move, but you're right, it really raises the stakes. Because now, Giovanni's won this round, and he knows it. That line at the end, how I love winning, chills, man.
Yeah,
Chills.
right. It's like he wants them to know they've lost, to really feel it. And it makes you wonder, what's next? What happens when a villain like that, so confident, so in control, what happens when they set their sights even higher?
That's the question, isn't it? And I gotta admit, I'm a little nervous to find out.
Yeah.
And it's not just that he won the fight, it's that, like, he meant to win. You know what I mean? He
Yeah.
planned it this way from the start. It's
Yeah.
like, where do they even go from here?
That's the beauty of a good cliffhanger. It's not just about leaving us hanging, it's about making us ask, what happens now? What would we do?
Right. Like, if we were writing the next chapter, and this is something I keep coming back to, it's Giovanni's knowledge, right? How does he know so much?
Oh.
It's more than just being a step ahead. It's like he's got some kind of sixth sense.
Maybe that is his power. Not super strength
Mhm.
or gadgets, but information.
Yeah.
Knowing what to look for, who to talk to. That's real power, don't you think?
True, true. In the wrong hands, info can be more dangerous than any weapon. And that's what makes Giovanni such a great villain, I think. He's not just some power-hungry maniac. He's like what's the word?
Strategic.
Yeah, strategic. He's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, you know?
100%. And that's why I loved this first chapter, this intro to the Crimson and Clocks world. It's familiar, right? We've got the young hero, the experienced partner, the villain with a plan. But the way it all comes together, it's fresh, it's exciting.
Totally agree. So we've got to wrap up, but man, this one's going to stick with me. What about you? What's the big takeaway, the thing that really resonated?
The idea that even in a world of superheroes, information is king. That's what sets Giovanni apart, makes him truly dangerous. And honestly, it's a good reminder for all of us, even without capes and time-freezing watches, to be careful what information we share, who we trust.
Ooh, good point.
Oh.
Little ominous ending there. I like it. So for everyone listening, think on that. In a world of heroes and villains, who controls the information? That's something to chew on. Until next time, dive deep and watch out for those cliffhangers.
That's all. I swear there was. That one. I feel like that one. Just submit. I knew. That by itself. Go with that. Again, more